My mum wants family therapy after being estranged by most of her children. My 57F mother wants family therapy and announced it on the group chat earlier today. I feel very weird about it and I don't know why. This is my first Reddit post and I don't know the social conventions here, so feel free to tell me if I made a mistake. Also, English is not my first language. Also, sorry this is gonna be long. I don't know what to cut. TLDR, my mum is a narcissist and blamed me for a lot of her issues. I cut her out of my life and my siblings are starting to do the same. Now she wants family therapy. Should I make an effort towards her and accept? Background first. I'm 27M and I have a brother 29M and a sister 32F. I also have a little brother 21M from a different father. My parents divorced when I was like 1 or 2 and I never knew them together. My mother left to live her life with a woman. My dad got full custody of us 3. He was a military and had a pretty rough childhood, with no stable family of his own, drunk and violent parents. He never spent 2 years in the same school because he was always in a different family. When my mum announced a few months after the birth of my sister that he had a daughter, he asked to be involved so he could have the family he never had. My mum had an unkind family. Sure, she got parents with stable jobs, lots of friends, she got to travel, go on vacations across the Atlantic, but her parents were not kind. Apparently my grandmother was violent and authoritarian with her, and she never had the attention she wanted as a kid with her dad. When my parents divorced, my maternal grandmother sided with my father, stating that her own daughter was unfit to be a mother and that we were safer with our father. She even flew with us in Africa, where my father was moved by the military with us 3, a single father with 3 kids in the early 2000s, a guy who wanted to be great and do great but had no clue how to do so and no example to follow. In a foreign freaking hot country, how could things turn wrong with that ideal situation? Well, my father raped my sister the whole year. She talked about it to adults, to friends, but nobody wanted to actually believe her or understand what she was sometimes saying with other words except her 2 best friends. She was 10. They made her promise to tell our mother about it when we came back home for the summer holidays, and she did. I can't stress how proud I am of being her brother. She's strong, resilient, smart, clever, witty, and kind, and I know I will never know how she's really feeling deep down. I know, even if it's been 20 years, that it's not completely over. When we were in Africa, my mother left her lesbian lover, who was a bit toxic apparently, but I don't have strong memories of her flower shop. He was 18 years older than her and had 3 daughters from a previous marriage, 2 of whom didn't speak to him anymore. People in the village told her to be cautious because he was known to be violent, but she decided to have a new baby with him anyways. My mum took the matters in hand, and I can't say that she failed us when we came back. The day after we came back, there was a pretty big party in the neighborhood to celebrate our arrival. She saw my sister, who looked awkward, aside and went to talk to her. In 2 questions, she gathered the fact that my dad did horrible things to my sister. Let's not talk about how she just needed 2 questions to know, because I don't believe in maternal instinct and I think she suspected stuff way before the divorce. The day after, they were at the police to file a complaint, and my dad was arrested back in Africa and put to jail. The trial was a few years after. We were lucky to be the few rape trials where the perpetrator is found guilty. He got 12 years of jail but left a few years earlier because of good conduct. So there we were, in a village we didn't know, in the house of a man we didn't know. My brother wasn't born yet, but my mother suffered a terrible miscarriage a few months before us coming back home. She had then the very difficult task to explain to a 5-year-old why he wouldn't see his father again before a long time. I think she did that well too. The explanations were clear and straightforward. I had the bees and birds talk earlier than what she had in mind. Come to think about it, it's a pretty fucked up way of discovering what's sex and how to make babies, to have it explained to you because you need to understand what's rape in case you were a victim too. Anyways, life went by. My stepdad was abusive and violent with us. He hit us, called us names. My sister got called a fucking whore more times than I can remember. When I was younger, I was certain that everything always happened when my mum couldn't see, but I remember crying at night during the first year here because my back hurt so much. When she came to see, I had an enormous bruise on the bottom cheeks from a whooping I got by my stepdad. But I think she put some cream on it and made me go back to sleep. I just remember that nothing changed afterwards. It became worse when my little brother was born because he was his actual son and not the children of his partner, so we weren't allowed to make any noise even before the birth. He called us by our father's name. You dirty Smith, because my father was a monster and we were just like him. He kicked us when we were on the floor, crying. Pretty shitty guy. My mum was often violent too, way less though, so it seemed normal. We left the day he hit her, 4 or 5 years after we moved with him. It's strange, now that I'm an adult it feels weird because 4 or 5 years are so short to me now, but it felt like my whole life when I was younger. The day he hit her, while she was trying to protect my sister from his violent rage, we were put in our friends' houses for a night, and then we were housed by friends for a month before obtaining a social housing solution. My little brother stayed with his father because we were sure that nothing would happen to him with his father. He's still his golden child. A few months later, while our family was broken, after a rapist father and abusive stepfather, my mum decided to go back to studying. So I was left in a family friend's family. My sister was in boarding school, my brother was sent to the other side of the country at my grandmother's, and my little brother stayed at his dad while my mother was going to college again at the capital city. When she came back home a few times a month, we were reunited, but we had to take care of her. We had to cook and clean and bring her food in her room while she was studying or writing a novel or other stuff like that. It was my first year of middle school and she couldn't come to my end-of-the-year show. Thankfully, my friend's parents were there. At the end of this year, she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, which was supposed to explain every crisis she was living and putting us through. I use that tone because a few years ago the diagnosis was cancelled. Turned out she was just hyper-emotional lol. And we had to be here to take care of her. My sister was the most involved, having to do the laundry and cleaning. I remember her psychiatrist coming to diner a night to tell us that we had to help our mother in the house, etc. I was 12. That is not something you ask someone else who's 12 years old. Also, she never had a job with the studies she did. She was a volunteer and shit, but no freaking money. The family was torn apart with the promise of good fortune. She met another guy, a stoner with a shitty job and a huge ego. They kinda lived together, kinda not. He was nicer than the previous father figures I had, but he left my mum because of me one day. He was asleep a Saturday at 10 a.m. My little brother woke me up by playing on the living room downstairs with the new cat we just got. I came to play with them and my brother was jealous because the cat preferred to play with me, and he threw a tantrum. He asked me why we were so loud, as if he couldn't see that it was my brother who was howling. Long story short, he asked me if I couldn't see all the efforts he made for me, convincing my mum to let me do stuff, or driving me to my friend's house, a 5 mn drive, mind you. And because I was a confrontational teenager, I told him the calmest no I could. So he threw a bar stool at me, screaming, got back upstairs, came back down with all his stuff and left. He drove past my mum on the way. She was buying bread, and I had to explain to her what happened because he didn't. And she was so mad at me that I wasn't allowed to eat with the family for a few days, and I was grounded in my room and she refused to speak to me directly. I was baffled by the fact that she was putting the weight of a grown-ass man's decisions on the shoulders of her own son. And of course, she doesn't remember any of this happening. A month later, I was coming downstairs and he was there, smiling, in the living room. And my mom tried to make me say hello to him. Girl, read the room. We had a terrible time at home. My mom was always accusing me of trying to guilt trip her when I was asking for her to do things differently. I remember one of my best friend's dad dying. It was the first death I could witness. I went to the funeral with my mum and I had to hold her and help her walk because she was so sad and howling. It was kind of embarrassing, but I was proud, so I stood my grounds and I helped her. But I was really afraid of her dying afterwards. I was often staying up at night because she was at yet another unpaid meeting for a big non-profit she was part of, and she was always really mad that I stayed up until 11 when I had class in the morning. When I finally explained that she was coming back home way past the time she announced, and I was afraid that she was dead on the road, she told me to brush it off and that everything was in my head, okay? But no, therapy was a punishment to me when I was younger. During the first year after living with the violent stepfather, I had terrible anger issues. I threw huge tantrums. I hated the whole planet because I had no dad anymore but didn't know how to say it, so I just insulted everyone, was pissed off by any comments I could hear, and I was hitting my head on the walls while screaming. My mum used to scream back at me that if I continue I'll go see a therapist, thus making me seeing therapists as a punishment, someone you go see when people just can't or don't want to deal with you. She also tried the cold shower with cloths on, but it didn't work. My big brother got more of those. I went to see a psychiatrist and just didn't want to, so I stopped having crises so I didn't have to go. The punishment worked, but nothing was fixed. It was just to ensure my mother some peace of mind. At the end of middle school, all my friends left me at once. They decided that they didn't want to talk to me anymore, and one day we were friends, the next they looked at me, refused to say hello, and turned their back on me. Maybe I was infuriating as a teen. I was pretty unpopular and weak, the fat, poor, awkward geek, so I got bullied a lot and I learned to answer with words. So I was zinging a lot, and maybe I zinged my friends too much. I think I'll never know really why, because when I tried to talk about it a few years ago, they had forgotten. Anyways, I was obviously pretty bummed out. I was feeling so deeply alone. I was heartbroken, devastated. That night I told my mum about it. Her first words were to tell me that I must have done something wrong. I was so mad at her, but so sad to hear that. This is when I first wanted to die. I wanted the suffering to end, the loneliness to end. I didn't want to be my father's child. I didn't want to be that fat kid, the ugly one. I refused to go to school for the end of the year. I didn't have to because there were just a few weeks left. I had excellent grades and no friends, absolutely no reason to go. When I told my mother that I wanted to die, that I felt like killing myself, she told me to stop the suicide blackmailing, and that if I really wanted to die, I just had to put my head in an oven. Even writing that, I am utterly flabbergasted by her audacity, because of course she tried to die by suicide a few times already, so she knew what it felt like. I think this is when I realized that I couldn't count on her. So I asked to be put in boarding school, and thanks to my grades I got a scholarship to pay for my high school. I still had to come back every weekend, but it was better than every night. At first I went because the high school was pretty far away. I went to a different high school so I wouldn't be with my bullies. We moved. High school was great for me. I made lots of friends, was strangely popular. I think people were more kind to strange kids, and I was a smartass and funny one. I was kind and wasn't afraid of making fun of the popular kids who tried to make fun of me. I don't know how, but I was a nobody for a few days, and then someone shouted, "Hell of a name, Peter," Mitchelson said with a smile and laughing eyes. People laughed and pointed to me in a cheerful way, and now my name was on the lips of people. Teachers loved me because I was kissing ass, but overdoing it to be funny, and I made a few smart comments here and there. They even let me sleep in class when I was exhausted. Honesty, I was very lucky. But I was also very depressed and didn't want to acknowledge it. I was contemplating suicide a lot. I felt alone, unsafe. I couldn't talk about it with my friends because they had pretty rough lives themselves, and I wanted to be there for them. I think that because I had good grades, I thought that everything was okay. If I was really not doing good, I would quit school and be a gangster or whatever, wouldn't I? How foolish I was. I remember a particular night that I was certain I wouldn't survive. I remember crying, telling my friends goodnight before going to bed, and them asking me what was wrong. I just couldn't tell them that I was planning on jumping by my bedroom's window because they would have kept me from doing it as I would have done for them. But I would have to explain to them, or to the adults, and then to my mother, what was happening. I think I felt guilty of yearning for a father because in my mind, my mum was a superhero, a warrior who took us off two abusive men and made everything she could to be the best parent, even if she was suffering terribly because of her bipolar disorder. IDK. I never told anyone. After high school, I went to Spain as an au pair. I lasted 3 months instead of 10 because I was depressed and got fired after a dispute with the dad of the family. They threw me out the day just before me secretly leaving them. I came back home and had to figure out what to do with myself. I wanted to study digital stuff, so I went to a college near the capital city of my country. My mum accused me of being arrogant, to live the fast life even if I couldn't afford it. She was mad because I needed state-funded money to help me with rent, and if I asked my money, she would have lost a bit. I met new friends, learned tons of stuff. It was really hard because I was studying a lot but didn't know how to work because everything had been so easy to me before, and I didn't know how to organize myself. I rapidly began to fall into depression again. That finally led to an actual suicide attempt at the beginning of the second year. I didn't realize I was doing so bad. And I didn't know I wanted to die until I did tried. I was rushed to the ER the next day because I managed, in my meds-induced sleep, to warn my friends. I remember their faces. Some friends just saw the ambulance from afar and knew it was for me. They came so they could see me. I loved them so much. I was such a mess. I don't know what they saw in me, but I'm so glad they did. Anyways, I come back home for a few weeks. Then I go back to college while promising my doc to seek treatment. The only psychiatrist I see while home is my mother's, who asks me very paternally, "What was that, first face? Well, fuck you too, doc." When I'm back with my friends, I do not seek the treatment. Well, I'm doing it correctly the first few treatments, but when we try a third treatment, I kind of stop when I realize it doesn't work. I don't have the strength to go to my appointments, which are an hour afar. I only go to one class because we have group work and I'm with my two friends who lived nearby. They hold me and we manage to produce a nice result. I unfortunately have to repeat the year and I'm left alone with no friends in my new class. They are nice, but it's not the same. A few weeks in and I realize this is about to end like the last time. I talk about it with my mother and I'm back home where I can finally let myself feel the pain and stop holding it. The weeks that follow are dark. I don't eat a lot, or I eat way too much. I cry for nothing. I develop a social phobia. I can't take the bus anymore because it makes me having panic attacks, and I was known to be super social before. I'm the shadow of the person I thought I was. But my mom isn't doing good either. So I'm the one bringing her meds in bed. I'm the one watching movies with her when she asks, even though I'd rather play video games. I'm holding her when she cries. I'm listening to her. She goes to the psychiatric hospital often for a few weeks and she comes back. I always have to bring her the stuff that she forgot. And she leaves a house absolutely disgusting, often her plates that she leaves to rot, and I have to clean it up so it's spotless when she comes home. But I'm not even capable of washing myself. I'm having regular appointments with my psychiatrist. I have new meds. I try maybe 10 different molecules in the span of 5 years. Nothing works. But I gain weight, I have trouble sleeping, but I'm always tired. I can't concentrate and I'm moody all the time. I managed to get a special contract to work in the museum department of my town and then COVID hits. It was kind of a blessing for me because I was not prepared for that job, LOL. I started new studies but stayed in my town where I found a degree that was similar to the one I tried doing near the capital city but that I didn't know of. I was a mess. Struggling to complete work I knew I was capable of doing. Sometimes when I was in class, thinking about the work I was doing in my favorite subject, I just couldn't think about it. No thought would form. When I realized that I was struggling too much and that I would not succeed, I worked to have a disabled student status that allowed me to skip classes and to have more years to finish my degree. I had a lot of appointments with a lot of different people to make this possible, and it was supposed to be a way for me to lift a bit of the pressure that I was feeling. My mom was very adamant about me going to classes, even though she knew I struggled. Sometimes she was so nasty about it that I just left the house for the day. I would go to the library with my Switch, play a bit, and come back home at the end of the day and invent what I did in class. During the third year of that 2022-2023, she became particularly nasty. She made a lot of comments about what the hell she would do if I didn't have my degree. Girl, what will I do? It's my degree, not yours. And that I was never helping and this is why the house was always dirty. Indeed, I was not helping, but I kept the majority of my stuff in my room. The rest was hers. She was equally to blame. I couldn't go to my favorite classes, and you expected me to Cinderella my way out of my room to clean the whole house. Like, be for real. That year, my New Year friends and I decided to celebrate New Year's Eve at my house, since my mom told me it would be free. She wanted to go at a friend's and such. But the 31st, she changed her mind. She wasn't feeling well at all. She was really sad, and I asked her if she wanted to stay and we would go to someone else's. She said that she would just stay in her room but that we should not stop of having fun because of her. She was gone by the time I got ready for bed in October of 1986, and only for a week. Fine, we were a lot and we had the biggest house. The rest had their own tiny student apartments, so we stayed. When midnight struck, we celebrated. Then I went to see my mom so I could wish her a happy new year. I hugged her and she began crying in my arms. I was so confused. I didn't know what was happening. I was very worried and tried to talk about it with her, but she didn't want to. So I left after wishing her a good night. A few days later, I could hear her talking about me on the phone to one of her friends. She was nasty, lying and changing the narrative of stuff so she could be the poor mother and I the mean son. I still don't know if she did it on purpose. She was so loud it woke me up even with my heavy meds. I didn't say anything, but I was so angry. And then, a few days again, the fight began. Long story short, she finally explained why she was crying on NYE. It was because of, drumrolls, me. Because I wouldn't help and didn't go to class, and what would she do if I had no diploma? And her friends are telling her to kick me out, but she's a good mother so she won't, but that's what she should do. So I moved out. I took a tiny student room next to my college, and in 2 weeks I was out. I don't know why I didn't do it earlier. I was paying more rent at my mom's than in my studio. She did grocery shoppings for me sometimes, but most of the time she just bought stuff she wanted for herself and that I wasn't allowed to eat. When she bought me stuff I wanted, it always felt strange, like, where's the trap? What will I have to do to earn that? How will you make it about yourself, or about me being a bad person? My life with a new flat began with my life with new meds. The lithium I was under didn't work, my body didn't catch it, and even if we doubled the doses, it wouldn't show on my blood tests. So we stopped that, and we stopped another thing that made me sleep a lot and take 45+ pounds. I also was diagnosed with sleep apnea and slept with a machine for a few months but didn't really see a difference before stopping the meds that made me sleep a lot. Fun fact, I have sleep apnea probably since I'm 8. I used to sit down during my sleep since that age, and it's when I stopped doing that thanks to the machine that I realized that it was a symptom of sleep apnea. Funny, the parents supposed to take care of my health knew that, but choose to bring me to the doctor because I was fatter than what she wanted, and when the doctor told her to leave me alone and that it was normal and that I was going to lose it while growing up, she put me on various diets anyways. So fun. We love a mother with priorities. Less than 3, less than 3, less than 3. Sorry, but sleep apnea is actually so bad, and I had not enough oxygen in my brain for nearly 15 years. And remember me falling asleep in class in high school and trouble concentrating and shit? Very probably sleep apnea. Well, now I couldn't sleep anymore with my meds. I couldn't sleep, so I made up scenarios in my head. Like, how could I make my life good again? How can I fix that? The obvious answer is to go back in time, meet my dad, and warn him that he's an incestuous rapist. Simple. And then, when thinking about what I wanted to tell my mother, I realized that I wanted to warn her that she shouldn't be a mother. So, it would make her unhappy and her children unhappy too. And when I realized that I wanted my only viable parent left, not to be a parent, well, I kind of fell down hard. Everything was coming back to me. Every bad decision, bad conversation. Every time I told myself it's hard for her, she's sick, she's doing the best she can. I am a difficult child after all. We're 4 and she's alone. We're poor, and now all the excuses I made up for her just felt wrong. I was extremely lucky to build solid friendships through my life, and those friends were amazing. I wouldn't be here without them. They listened to my 2 hours of voice notes, each a separate recording that I did to everybody who was willing to listen, and commented. Even in some group chats where there's always a quiet one, the quiet one came and gave great advice and listened so well. I felt so loved and heard, and they made me feel worthy of their love. I had a godson that was nearly 1 that I hadn't been able to meet yet, and the fact that I was chosen to be a reliable adult in his life made me so proud, and made me want to be the adult I didn't have in case he needed one. The only one who could help me was myself, after all. I really wanted to be helped by my parents. I wanted the security and love of a father and of my mother. But I didn't get that, and I never will. I have to create my own sense of security somehow. I didn't tell my mother about it, but I told my big brother and sister. They were incredible too. It was so nice to be able to exchange about our different perceptions of our lives. Some memories are not the same. My sister left when she was 17 because she couldn't bear living with my mother anymore. My brother left later and was still in touch, but he was aware of how self-centered she was, and he was just living with it. We talked about when I used to insult him and annoy him until he was so mad that he ran after me with a huge knife around the apartment. I used to lock myself in the toilet and he would stab the door with the knife. We were like 12 and 14. When we told our mother, she said that it was none of her business. Can you imagine being a parent? having a child so annoying that his brother wants to stab him, and another child so hot-tempered that his first answer is to grab a fucking knife to stab his brother, and then, not listening to what each has to say. IDK, maybe I'm too demanding, LOL, she has said that to me. 2 months after moving out, I saw her again because I had to retrieve books in my old bookshelf. We were still in speaking terms, because she had no idea what was brewing in my mind. But she had a fight with my sister, who left out a "I'm not the only one of your children who has something against you these days," and my mom used that to corner me. I wanted to speak to my psychologist that I started to see a few weeks earlier about it. I wanted to have a real talk, to make things better. I wanted my anger to be gone, so it would have been just hope for a better relationship. I wanted her to evolve and grow. I really thought that it was possible. But we had the fight. I tried to stay calm, but I think I ended matching her screams. She told me in no particular order that it was all my father's fault, that I was mean to her, that she could have thrown me out but she didn't, that she's always been just a mother and now it was time for her to be a woman, that society put way too much pressure on women, and that as a so-called feminist, mind you, I don't call myself a feminist because I'm not a woman, and I think that actions speak more than titles. I'm openly in favor of feminist causes though. She told me that we just read too much on the internet. Maybe that's why I'm posting that, haha. And that my sister and I are just the same, and that we're the only one who feel like that because my brothers have zero issues with her, so we're the ones that are wrong. She asked me if I didn't see how hard it was for her to be so alone now, that she didn't have any friends. I tried to encourage her to seek therapy like I was, and she told me that no, her therapy is done. She's seen a therapist for a few years in the hospital, and now she's into Reiki magnetism stuff, and that these are stuff that I'll just have to learn to live with. I told her that this was not possible. She asked me what would happen if nothing changes. So it's me who's the problem. I told her that we would see each other on birthdays and funerals, and that's it. Then she cried, howled, told me that I was so mean, and shouted me to leave. 15 minutes later, in the bus, the 4 children received a text to MSG, telling us that everything was her fault, and that she tried her best but failed and was sorry. Of course, first reflex now, we make sure she's still alive. We're kinda used to now. I was pissed and sad and mad, and kinda glad it left my body for a bit. And then I called my grandmother, that I loved deeply. Yes, the one in the beginning. She was a bit mean, but she softened up with me and learned how to respect my boundaries, and realized that while I was finally, after 10 years of depression, having hope in the future, she was dying. I could hear at her voice that she wasn't well. I was devastated. She helped me a lot, financially, helping me with rent, buying me really nice stuff when I had good grades. She was a bit stuck in her old ways, but was learning to forget about them. I had to hand up on her a few times so she would understand that trying to kick me in the ass to get out of my depression wouldn't help. So a month after our fight, I had to put it aside to talk with my mother about her own mother dying. They were on talking terms for a few months only. My mother was really mad at my grandma for not helping during the rape trial, for testifying against her during the divorce trial. I could understand that, but at the end, my grandma died next to my mum. She was living really far away, like a day trip. And my mum rang me in the morning to tell me that she probably wouldn't survive the night, and that I had to take the first train if I could. I did that. She died during my trip. I was the last one to learn about it. They didn't want to tell me while I was alone in the train. It's nice, I think. My mum told me that now she was here for me because during our fight I told her that I was the one taking care of her. She wasn't really, but I appreciate the sentiment. She told me how my grandma died. My mum told her about her partner she was going to see again and her son she loved so much. They respectively died 6 months and a year and a half before. And she told her that I was there with her and that she could leave, that she didn't have to suffer anymore, that I wouldn't mind. But I did mind. I didn't say anything. I didn't realize at that time that I minded. I don't think I told anyone how much I mind. I was on the way. I was not there. I could have been here. She didn't know my grandma like I did. It's so childish to say, I know. Writing that now, I think she was more like a distant mother to me. She's the one that was stable. She's the one that I could count on. And I couldn't say goodbye to her. I know my mum did her best and all. I know she didn't want my grandma to suffer more, and I didn't either. She was apparently calling for her own mother in a pathetic voice. Why am I mad? It's just basic empathy, not to make her suffer more. Maybe I'm jealous that my mum got to have that last moment and I didn't. She had so more years with her. I know it's so infuriating, that anger, that sadness, and to know it's not rational or not the way you want to feel about an issue. Anyways, my mum was nicerish than usual at the beginning. Still couldn't help herself to talk shit about me to my brother, who told me about it. I was glad to go back home without her, to pass my auditions to the conservatory and go back to work. We didn't see each other a lot. She drove me with my suitcase to a friend's during the summer. My friend was alone and feeling deeply suicidal. I was staying with her so she could have someone to talk to and not do anything drastic. And during the drive, she told me all about all the weight she lost. I said nothing, because during our fight, I reminded her that her obsession with her weight gave to the 4 children body image issues and eating disorders, and it made me feel very uncomfortable when she was talking about her own weight. She saw my face at a stop, laughed and told me, "You don't like when I talk about that, don't you? Ha ha ha." I said, "No, I don't." And she continued. That was the reminder that even if she was saying she was making efforts, she wasn't actually doing them. The last drop was at the end of the summer. She knew I had a lot of work because it was peak tourist season and we were asked to do the cleaning of the museum too. So I was exhausted, and she rang me at 7:30 in the morning. I hung up before answering, checked my messages in case she left me a text first. She did. I panicked when I read urgent at the beginning. Was my grandfather sick? My grandparents were divorced too, but my grandfather was not doing good, even if he ended up hating my grandmother. No, nothing like that. Her phone was blocked and she needed me to go to the phone store or to call a number so she could unlock it, that before work. Instead of, I don't know, doing it herself? I sent her a long text, very calm, very demure, you know when you are stressed like that, take the time to analyze the situation, can you fix it yourself, etc., etc. I sent it and read it again, and I felt like I was talking to a little girl and how to manage her emotions, and I was still taking care of my mother. So I stopped answering messages after that. We saw each other on Christmas, because my sister gave birth to a beautiful boy in September and I wanted to be there for his first Christmas, and my mother wanted to be a good grandmother, so she kinda make efforts, and kinda didn't. Apparently she's very unreliable. I went to her birthday in January and she thanked me with watery eyes that made me want to open my own throat. We had a few exchanges, my email. She paid for my school insurances for a bit when I didn't have the money too, and for my scholarships. I still need her tax papers. I remained polite but a bit cold, maybe. Very corporate. Hello, I would need this document for that. Could you please send it to me? Thank you. First name? So she answers by telling me that okay, here you go, but I'm not just a secretary or a storage unit owner. But where does that come from? We should talk about it, please. I have feelings, but of course, as always, they don't matter, etc. Last exchange was last week. She sent me my insurance papers, but I had made changes about it and had been paying them for a few months. I told her that it was a mistake and that she shouldn't receive any more like that, since I've started the procedures to pay them myself a few months ago. She told me I paid them last month because they hadn't registered my bank informations that I sent them way earlier, lol. The procedures were done, and added, since we're using that tone. I was really formal, lol, not aggressive or petty or anything. I want you to empty your room so I can make a room for your nephew in it. That pisses me off because that's what she was referring to when talking about being a storage unit owner. She cannot just ask, she has to make backhanded comments about it. I say nothing about how it makes me feel because it's not useful to the situation, so I ask her when she would need to have it empty. Well, apparently, the end of the school year. Aka, the previously already discussed date which we agreed on when I left a year ago. Like we talked about it when I left. She was really okay with me leaving my stuff until I have a real flat with room to put my queen-size bed and all, since my student room is already furnished. But I think it would be easier not to have any more ties with her. I'm going to find a way to empty that room. I'm pissed because I'm going to have to sell furnitures I would have used in a year. I could leave them there, but I really don't want to have anything to do anymore with her. And now, the question. She sent a message to the group chat asking to do family therapy. She's having fights with my sister. My big brother is kinda silent about his own life with her, I think, and apparently my little brother asked to live with her to find a job. He's still in our old village, far away from anything, and she refused, lol. You'll always have a home at my place, she said. But that's not my problems. Those are their stories. SPS. My terrestrial and domestic. She'll pay for therapy. She suggests that we do Christmas without her, and she'll host Christmas breakfast at her home if we want to join. I was planning on going to my godson's family, but nothing was decided yet. She's apparently trying to make an effort. She stated it was so it doesn't impact my nephew's life. The message itself is okay, but I still read it with deep "she's manipulating me" vibes. She sounds like a bad actress. I love you deeply. It's the reason behind this message. Don't jump on your keyboards to answer. Think about it. Sit down with it. Take the time. Thank you for that, Mum. Like, okay, Miss Thing. Going for the Oscar in a drama, I see. I'm sorry, I'm a bit biased. Maybe she's not that dramatic. I just know she was so satisfied about herself about it because I've seen her send so many texts like that. So, what should I do? Should I make an effort too? I've been a mess since this message. I feel trapped. I feel selfish if I refuse. But also maybe I should be selfish. I do not want to spend time and energy helping her. I don't think I'd be helping myself doing that. Maybe I'm too stubborn to realize it. I have a really busy schedule. I have great friends, good bonds with my siblings. Well, my little brother has fallen down in the alt-right rabbit hole, but that's another story. I have a nice work. I'm trying to finish my bloody degree. I'm good without her right now. Should I work so the future me who might need her be not disappointed? I'll talk about it with my therapist too. I think she's trying to help me cut ties. She's telling me all about how free I would be without my stuff at her place.